Chapter 1.2 Contract Theory.
Aber auch dieses Argument scheitert an den Tatsachen.
This argument also fails on the facts, for where, oh where, is the contractual consent to the Constitution? Where are the signatures of all those supposedly subjected to the Constitution? A few politicians sign the Constitution once, and a few politicians invoke it these days, but I haven't signed it, and pretty much no one else has signed it.
Und so gut wie niemand sonst hat sie unterschrieben. Also muss ein weiteres Argument her.
Therefore, another argument must be made. This argument has been rehashed recently by great intellectuals like John Rawls and James Buchanan. Rawls is generally regarded as a leftist, and Buchanan, as a winner of the Nobel Prize in Economics, is described by the same authorities as a rightist and touted as a great radical free market economist.
Als Rechter bezeichnet und als großer radikaler Freimarktwirtschaftler angepriesen.
In substance, however, their two arguments do not differ in any way, and, as can be expected from officially approved great intellectuals, their argument is equally ludicrous.
Ihr Argument gleichermaßen hirnrissig.
According to their argument, it is not at all necessary to have signed a contract in order to have concluded a contract. True to the motto, no contract is also a contract.
Kein Vertrag ist auch ein Vertrag. Wie soll das zugehen?
Now, how is that supposed to work? For this, it is supposedly sufficient to have concluded a fictitious contract between fictitious, supposedly reasonable people.
Bei Rawls ist das ein hinter dem Schleier,
With Rawls, this is a contract concluded behind the veil of ignorance. And with Buchanan, the same fictitious contract is called a conceptual contract.
Und mit diesem Trick,
And with this trick, by means of a fictitious, mental instead of real contract, Rawls and Buchanan then even claim to have solved another problem.
Problem gelöst zu haben. Denn mit
For with real contracts, it is obviously impossible to bind future generations. How should they have signed a contract?
einen Vertrag denn unterschrieben haben. Mit nur gedanklichen
With only imaginary contracts between fictitious, reasonable persons, on the other hand, this is no longer a problem. By means of fictitious contracts, it is easy to make the case that all persons for all times are bound.
als gebunden aufzufassen. Die Lächerlichkeit
This ridiculousness of this construction of fictitious contracts should be obvious, but perhaps it is nevertheless worthwhile to briefly investigate the question whether it is ever conceivable that reasonable persons could enter into a contract, a la Rawls or Buchanan.
Rawls oder Buchanan abschließen können. Man stelle sich also vor,
Imagine then that a supposedly reasonable person makes the following proposal. Given the reality and possibility of interpersonal conflict, I propose as a permanent and indissoluble agreement the establishment of a state.
als dauerhafte und unauflösliche Vereinbarung die Einrichtung eines Staates vor. Wir gründen eine Institution.
We establish an institution that has authority to act as the final arbiter on a given territory.
Territorium als Letztrichter tätig zu sein. Der Staat, oder konkreter gesagt, der oder die Inhaber und
The state, or more concretely, the owners and administrators of the state, have the last word on who is right in a dispute and who is wrong in a dispute, in any case of conflict, including all cases of conflict in which they, that is, the agents of the state, are themselves involved.
wer in einem Streitfall Recht hat und wer in einem Streitfall Unrecht hat.
And it should be clear that persons who see themselves as managers of the state or imagine that they will become managers of the state, that they would enthusiastically welcome such an arrangement. After all, what could not be done when wielding such an institution? To decide in every case of conflict who is right and who is wrong. That would be just fabulous.
Aber dieser Einrichtung doch nicht alles anstellen könnte, in jedem Konfliktfall zu entscheiden, wer Recht hat und wer Unrecht hat. Das wäre ja geradezu toll. Aber ist es denkbar, dass alle
But is it conceivable that all reasonable persons could agree to such an arrangement?
Und da sage ich glaube nicht, dass es sehr wagemutig ist.
And here I say, I do not think it is very daring to claim that it is completely out of the question. One would rather regard the proponent of such a proposal as insane and ripe for the loony bin than agree to this.
Zu stimmen. Denn jede Person, die auch nur halbwegs bei Sinnen ist, würde so
For any person even halfway sane would immediately recognize what this treaty means in its consequence. The state, or its agents, can cause conflicts themselves and then always decide them in their own favor. In view of this, one could literally no longer be sure of one's very life or property.
Man könnte angesichts dessen buchstäblich nicht mehr seines Lebens und seines Eigentums sicher sein.
One no longer has a right to life, but only insofar as the state lets us live, and at that, as long as it does not order us to kill and die for its owners.
Töten und sterben müssen. Und man hat
One has no more right to one's own property, but only to the extent that the state leaves us our property so long as it does not decide to take it away from us or to expropriate us. That is, all private property becomes fiat property, property by the grace of the state.
Eigentum von Staates Gnaden. Lassen mich noch mal
Let me emphasize again that this all follows directly from the fact that the state is always the final arbiter in all cases of conflict, including cases of conflict in which it itself is involved. This is a logical consequence of social contract theory. Whoever agrees to this deal can no longer be sure of his life and property.
seines Eigentums nicht mehr sicher sein.
Hence my assertion, no reasonable person would ever agree to such a contract.
Niemals zustimmen können.